Good to go.
All right. Good morning and welcome. I'm Austin Holmes, your host of Dallas Housing Coalition's Housing for All webinar series and a senior development associate at Dominium. On behalf of Dominium, I also serve as a member of the Dallas Housing Coalition Steering Committee. We are back with the 45th installment of our Housing for All webinar series, sponsored by Dominium, where we discuss whether Dallas is big and if it is truly big enough for everyone. We hope you've been enjoying these impactful one-on-one conversations with DHC members and other community leaders who are Dallas's strongest advocates for keeping Dallas affordable. We are continuing our mini-series interviewing candidates running for Dallas City Council about housing and homelessness, as well as transportation and the city's budget. After May's general election, there are currently two districts in runoff elections, District 8 and District 11. We have invited and are asking both candidates to come on here and gonna ask them the same questions out of fairness to each should they choose to appear. Our audience has the opportunity to watch the webinar live or at a later time and can consider getting further involved with the campaigns if they would like to. This morning, we will be speaking about District 11. District 11 is positioned squarely in central North Dallas, containing parts of I-75, 635, Hillcrest, and Spring Valley roads. Whoever is elected to the seat will likely turn their attention to projects like the redevelopment of Valley View Mall and the completion of the International District. The new council member will also need to carefully liaison between neighborhoods and developers as Dallas continues to look for ways to spur housing development. This morning, I'm excited to interview Jeff Kitner, and we'll let everyone know if we are able to bring Bill Roth on at a later date. But today we have Jeff Kitner available, and excited to speak with us. Jeff is a Dallas native and longtime resident of District 11. As the Chief Operating Officer of the North Dallas Chamber of Commerce, Jeff is committed to its mission to make Dallas a better place to live, work, and raise a family and build a business. Formerly a litigation partner at Jackson Walker LLP, Jeff joined NDCC in 2018 and from 2017 through 2024, he served as a District 11 representative to the Park and Recreation Board. As a former president of the Friends of North Haven Trail, he was instrumental in the completion of the full trail and the North Haven Trail Bridge. He currently serves on numerous other boards, including the Temple Emmanuel UTSW Simmons Cancer Center Community Advocacy Board, Dallas Education Foundation, Friends of Dallas Public Library, and the Jewish Community Center of Dallas. He is also a member of the Dallas Assembly, a nonprofit composed of Dallas leaders who foster discussions on topics and key local issues. Welcome, Jeff.
Thanks, Austin. I appreciate that very generous introduction. I'm glad to be here.
Well, you're involved in a lot of things, so we want to make sure folks know. Let's start off with a simple question to allow you to introduce yourself further. And you will have 3 minutes for each response, so we can get through all of the questions. So first off, why did you decide to run to be District 11's next council member?
Well, thanks, Austin. I appreciate the opportunity and appreciate this conversation and look forward to chatting with you about all these things. I think, as everybody is aware that there are a lot of opportunities and challenges for our city right now. And so we need council members who are experienced in getting stuff done for the city and for the community. And that's me. You referenced some of the projects that I've worked on before. I've got a long track record of just getting stuff done in a positive and collaborative way for the city, both in my professional capacities and my personal capacities. And so you had touched on some of the things that I've done in my volunteer roles, serving on the Park and Recreation Board for the last 7 years, representing District 11 and working on projects like the expansion of the North Haven Trail. I'm a past president of the Friends of North Haven Trail as well, and we expanded that trail using the Encore easement from 2 miles to 8 miles, all the way west
Wow.
into District 13 and District 6, working with my colleagues in those districts on that project as well. Calvert Collins Bratton and Tim Dickey in District 6. The North Haven Trail Bridge, which y'all have seen over 75, that brings together our city in a way that we've never had before, connecting our trails to North Haven Trail, to the White Rock Creek Trail, to the Cottonwood Creek Trail, in the future to the Sopac Trail. You can really get anywhere in the city. And so those have been some of the higher profile things, but other things within neighborhoods that are really impactful on neighborhoods as well. New playgrounds at Arapahoe Park and Kiowa Park, working with the neighbors there to bring about things that are important to them. The woods at Valley View, we'll probably talk about this later because that was a program that directly addressed some of the challenges that we've had with homeless encampments in District 11 within our parks, and working with the communities there to clear out some of the encampments and debris within the woods there and make it accessible for everybody to hike through in the heart of North Dallas. And so another great project working directly with neighborhood leaders and community members from the Valley View Neighborhood Association just north of Hillcrest and LBJ. That's just some of the park stuff. You mentioned the Friends of the Dallas Public Library. I'm a past advocacy co-chair of FDOPL, where we worked on increasing hours for the libraries, increased budget for library and circulating materials, and then some of the bond program allocations that we addressed last cycle, renovations to the Preston Royal Library, new branches, new coming to the Oak Cliff Library and to the Park Forest Library. So, working on things to just bring about quality of life improvements for our city. And then on the professional side, working with the chamber to diligently improve our quality of life initiatives for everybody. One example of that is something that's going on right now in the state legislature. I helped lead the Better Elections Dallas Coalition to help move local elections from May of odd years to November of odd years. We passed that, we got that through the City Charter Commission and then to the City Council for approval to put onto the ballot. And the reason that that's a good thing is because you'll increase turnout by moving elections from May of odd years to November of odd years, and you'll save the city approximately $400,000 in doing so, because the state is already having to do constitutional amendment elections during those cycles. And so this is something that's had broad bipartisan support, and the timing is perfect because it just passed through the House Elections Committee this week by a 9-0 margin. And now it is heading to hopefully the Calendars Committee to get on the docket for a full floor vote. It passed the Senate unanimously 30-0. And so I'll put in a brief plug here, contact anybody on the House Calendars Committee or anybody any legislators of the Texas House to get that legislation passed, because it's good for the city of Dallas and it's good for voter turnout and engagement, and it'll save us some money. So I know it's probably more than 3 minutes, but just wanted to touch on some of the things that I have done, why I'm the best candidate for this role. But these are the kinds of things that I'm going to be focused on as a council member. Boring stuff like prioritizing infrastructure and public safety and housing and parks and arts and libraries, the basics of city government. And so, that's why
That's the
I
key.
decided to run, and that's why I'm here.
Yeah, no, I appreciate you outlining those items. As a biker, I love what you're saying about all those trails and the work with the libraries is fantastic, and your emphasis on just really getting things done is key, because often folks their disengagement comes when their thoughts are that things aren't getting done, and so it's really key that you're able to emphasize those items, as well as the election timing thing. That is just huge, and I really encourage folks to look into that a little bit further. It makes a lot of logical sense of why turnout would be higher if we kind of time those elections up in that manner. So that's really exciting.
Yeah,
So
there's a lot of
yeah,
voter fatigue too.
yeah,
People, just talking about this election alone,
mhm,
there, yeah, if you look at some of the other districts, that people are winning with 1,000 votes in these
yeah,
city council races where turnout is so low. But this is what affects us directly: our roads, the potholes, public safety.
yeah,
But the turnout is so low, and so we just need more people engaged in voting in these elections. And the best way to do it is to shift these from May of odd years to November of odd years, where you already have more people engaged.
exactly, exactly. So the Dallas Housing Coalition launched in June of 2023 around a $200 million bond campaign with 65 members. And we now have over 300 members committed to advocating for the creation and preservation of attainable housing for all at the local, state, and federal levels. What does attainable housing mean to you? And where does addressing housing and homelessness rank in terms of your top priorities and what you are hearing from your voters?
Yeah, thanks. Great question. And this is something housing is coming up frequently in my conversations with voters and at meet and greets. And I'm hearing a lot about residents who are having a hard time finding housing, or they're having a challenge in finding something affordable in the area that they want to be in. And so my takeaway is that we need more of all kinds of housing. That's single
Okay.
family residential housing. We need more townhomes. We need multifamily. There are needs across the city for all of these types of housing because not everybody wants a single family home. Not everybody can afford that. Some people prefer density. Some people prefer less density. And so we need to be trying to offer all kinds of housing, and we just don't have enough of it right now. And so, I look at things like in the southern part of our district, Preston Hollow Village, the development at Walnut Hill in 75. And, this is personal to me because in 2019, our house was hit by the tornado. And so we
Oh,
had to move
yes.
out for a year. And we lived at Preston Hollow Village for a year and had a really positive experience there, being able to walk to the Trader Joe's and to the restaurants there. Lived with a lot of other tornado refugees in those apartments. It was fairly new. And, I just see that as something that's been successful from the
Mhm.
standpoint of providing housing, but also providing us with some additional tax revenue. And so just we got to be creative and trying to find more opportunities for all kinds of housing, whether it's single family residential, townhomes, multifamily. But I'm just hearing from folks that they can't afford to buy a house, and so for them, living somewhere like a Preston Hollow Village is where they want to be next. And so we
Yeah.
just need to be focusing on trying to meet people where they are and identify the housing needs that will best suit them.
Definitely. So, the Child Poverty Action Lab found that Dallas is short over 39,000 rental homes for households making 50% of our average median income. That's around 48,700 or so, for a family of four. And the Building Community Workshop found Dallas is over 16,000 attainable for sale homes short. If elected, what specific steps would you take to increase Dallas's housing supply, and start to close those housing shortages, specifically for those at those income levels that I mentioned?
Yeah, great question. And we touched on a little of this a little bit before in the prior
Mhm.
question, but again, it just comes down to prioritizing, all types of housing, whether that is affordable housing, luxury housing, single family, trying to identify where all those things will go. We cannot say no to everything. We've got to be looking around at blighted areas for
Mhm.
good opportunities for housing. And one example that, I talk about frequently on the campaign trail is over at 75 and Forest. There's a rundown gas station, which is no longer there.
Mhm.
It's right next to the DART station. It's right along the White Rock Creek Trail.
Okay.
And there's nothing happening there right now. And to me, like that is a perfect spot because it's right next to public transit. You could do
Yeah,
some transit oriented development there. We've got to prioritize things like that. And so, to me, like that's a kind of site where we need to be looking at something creative like a public transit oriented development where folks can get on the White Rock Creek Trail and ride somewhere, or they can take darts somewhere. But taking advantage of these blighted spaces, you mentioned Valley View as well.
yeah,
Obviously, that's the number one economic development opportunity for our district, if not the whole city. So we've got to continue to focus on there. Housing is should be a key component of what eventually comes in there. But we just need to be looking at, housing near public transit, other public spaces, and trying to prioritize those things.
definitely. Definitely. That makes sense. So as far as key steps that you're taking, I guess what one thing that you mentioned there is specifically the identification of some of these parcels that should, in your view, be ripe for this sort of development that could potentially house some of these folks at these differing income levels. I guess what steps could you take around that? Could you maybe like a inventory online, or what sort of, I guess, things are you envisioning that, to actually get from, hey, that, should be a development, to it's actually we're breaking ground, we're actually building units that are attainable for folks at that income level?
Yeah, I think it's working with groups like y'all, with groups
Hmm.
like Trek, other folks that have an interest, and Trek's endorsed me. The Real Estate Council, they've endorsed me in this campaign. The
Yeah.
Apartment Association of Greater Dallas have also endorsed me.
Hmm.
Working with groups like y'all and these other groups that are trying to bring about additional housing and development to help our city thrive and succeed, to identify these best locations. And so, I could drive around the district and, I could tell you anecdotally that it is a pretty well-developed district. So we
Yeah.
have to be creative in trying to find those spaces where we can do projects like these. And so, the Preston Hall Village is one that I talk about, frequently because it's been successful. Valley View, the same potential to come there. We had the Hillcrest Village Green area, which doesn't have any residential,
Hmm.
but that's the kind of thing where what I would envision as successful for being at Valley View is like a park-oriented development with some multifamily that you can live, work, and play in. And so,
Yeah.
just trying to identify those spots, working with groups like y'all and Trek and the Apartment Association to find these. And again, since D11 is pretty well developed, we also
Yeah.
need to be thinking about where can we do this throughout the city. And that's where it's
Yeah.
so important to have a collaborative relationship with your other colleagues on the
Hmm.
council and identifying these spots because, 2/3 of the land in the city of Dallas is south of downtown. And so we absolutely need to continue to prioritize growing in southern Dallas and identifying the areas there where we can do some of these developments too.
Definitely. So in that vein, you did talk about how District 11 is fairly built out at the moment. And so in that, based off that, District 11 is home to a good amount of naturally occurring affordable housing because it is already built out. You do have some of the older vintage communities already there. Um, how will you protect affordability in this area and help new higher end things that might come in to redevelop or rehab those naturally occurring affordable housing options, include options for the more workforce income level folks in those new communities? How will you, what specific steps will you take to encourage that as because it is fairly built out, and so a lot of this placemaking, the creation of space within District 11 for folks at this income level is will likely happen through kind of the redevelopment of existing things, and you definitely are at risk of losing affordability net if the naturally occurring stuff gets redeveloped and the rents get hiked and new folks kind of come in. So how can you kind of combat that, and how can we make sure that District 11 is this place where folks of different incomes can continue to live?
Yeah, and it already is, and I think that's where continue to work with groups like y'all and Track and others who are invested and understand like where we can do these kinds of developments is so critical. And so I know we've talked about Valley View and we've talked about Preston Hall Village and some of these
Mhm.
areas where we see it succeed or where it can succeed. But the key here is just working collaboratively with others to identify these opportunities and making sure that District 11 is a welcoming place for everybody, that whatever kind of housing you want, whether it's single family residential, whether it's a townhome, whether it's multifamily, that we have some inventory to meet your needs. And so that's where it just comes down to working collaboratively with others to identify those opportunities and implementing them.
Definitely. Okay. Research shows that allowing denser mixed-use housing developments can improve city finances without raising taxes. Would you support zoning or incentive changes in District 11 to unlock the potential and help address Dallas's widening budget deficits in addition to its housing needs? Given that, increasing density in that fashion sometimes is not popular. And there's often a lot of pushback within the community. And so sometimes it takes a council member or a community leader with a vision to really stand in there and withstand that. What are your thoughts on that? How would you deal with that if you're facing an opportunity to maybe get some more tax revenue and get some more workforce housing, but it's going to come with a denser community that some folks might have pushback on.
Yeah, and that's why there's a balance here, and that's where it comes down to working well with developers, with the community members, with neighbors to identify these locations. And so that's where we think about things in these transit-oriented development, something near DART
Yeah.
or in the Valley View area where we have these strong opportunities where it's not going to have a negative impact on anybody. And so
Mhm.
you're going to be in spots where we need development, we need to get away from blight and more towards towards activating these spaces in a positive way. And so just trying to identify those spaces. We've done it before. I talked
Mhm.
about Preston Hall Village, like that's been successful. I also know that there's state legislation right now that might allow for this by right. And so
Mhm.
tracking that, if that happens, it's going to be out of the city's hands anyway. It'll be something that's allowed by state right. And so we just need to be looking at all legal and creative options for increasing our tax revenue so that we can pay for all of our many needs. It just can't be solely on the responsibility of residential property owners to shoulder the burden. And so we've got to
Yeah,
be relying on commercial development and others to pay for all of our many needs because we have so many of them. We're coming up into a budget shortfall. It's going to be a difficult budget session. We're
yeah,
going to have to make some hard choices. And so we've got to be thinking creatively about how do we bring in additional tax revenue for the city that's not solely coming from us as property owners.
definitely, definitely. Okay. So to sum that up, you would be supportive of those sorts of incentive changes and those sorts of zoning, but it's all about balance and it's all about keeping an eye on the budget and making sure that, when you're doing that, it's actually beneficial for the city in both in terms of housing and budget wise, tax revenue wise, what you're getting out of it.
Yeah, generally so. It's just going to be a case by case basis. It's hard
Mhm.
to talk about some of these things in hypothetical
Yeah,
ways,
of
but
course.
we have
Yeah.
seen these kinds of projects succeed before.
Mhm.
But again, my approach to development is going to be, on a case by case basis to review what has come forward, working, if there's neighborhoods that are impacted by it, working with those groups just to make sure any concerns are addressed, and trying to figure out how can we on balance, bring in additional tax revenue for our city, but also not have a negative impact on anybody when there's concerns about those kinds of developments.
Definitely. Okay. Homelessness remains a concern citywide. But the homelessness count in Dallas and Collin County is down for the fourth year in a row, as announced by the state by the at the State of Homelessness address by Housing Forward this week. What is your perspective on the root causes of homelessness, particularly in District 11? And what specific strategies would you champion to address both the immediate needs and long-term solutions for persistent homelessness issues?
Yeah, and Austin, as you point out, this is not something that's unique to District 11. This is a citywide problem, and it is
So,
probably,
countrywide, yeah.
countrywide, exactly. And it comes up a lot when when we're talking about public safety, because in District 11, people, we're not experiencing significant violent crime, but I think
Mhm.
when we talk about public safety from a District 11 perspective, a
Yeah.
lot of what people are concerned about are homelessness and panhandling, and we can talk about those two things separately here. But as you point out, homelessness is a citywide, nationwide problem,
Yeah.
and there's no easy answer to this. But we need to be continuing to work with all of our partners at the nonprofit level to find the folks who have um, you know, you know, have whether it's mental illness or whatever it might be, just to
Mhm.
find them the help that they need, or if there's folks that want the housing, just to find them the housing that they need. And so working with our federal and state partners, because we have limited dollars from the city's perspective, and so trying to find additional funding services to help pay for these things, and also working with our nonprofit community who
Mhm.
excel at these things, and so just trying to get all of these folks together to identify these problems and solve them. Panhandling is another thing that comes up frequently too, and that's been a big challenge in District 11. And I think about areas like the Design District where you
Mhm.
don't see any panhandling. What you
Mhm.
see in the medians are public art, and you see green space. And I just think about trying to activate some of these challenging areas in a more positive
Mhm.
way. And so put some public art in one of these medians, or put some green space, or just do something a little bit different
Yeah.
to disincentivize the panhandling, because there's a lot of concerns about people being approached by panhandlers and not feeling safe about that. And
Mhm.
I look at what this town of Addison has done as well too. They
Mhm.
have a campaign that says instead of giving money to a panhandler, you scan this QR code and donate to the charity. And so just operating as a disincentive that way. And so I'm
Yeah.
hearing a lot about panhandling and homelessness as challenges. And I touched on this earlier, but the woods at Valley View, at
Yeah.
Hillcrest and LBJ, this was an area that if you've ever ridden, as a cyclist, you probably have ridden on the White Rock
Yeah.
Creek Trail, and you've gone north to where it terminates, and you
Mhm.
go through Valley View Park. And contained within Valley View Park is this wooded area that for a long time has been completely inaccessible to the public for a variety of reasons, but one of which is it was overrun with homeless encampments and debris. And so, working in partnership with that community there, the neighborhood leaders, we went in there and
Yeah.
got city staff involved, and we cleared out all the debris. And what developed instead were a series of nature trails within the woods. And now you go out there every weekend, there's people walking through there with their dogs and kids,
Mhm.
and it's a nature trail area in the heart of North Dallas. And so, just trying to think creatively about, how do we make people feel safe in all of our public safety spaces? Because, this is an issue that comes up often, and people say, I'm worried about homelessness. I don't feel safe going into our
Yeah.
parks and our public spaces. And so we need to be trying to address things this way, thinking creatively of how do we activate these spaces in a positive way.
Definitely. Yeah, I love that. I love that idea. There are a lot of amazing groups, like Better Block and others that look at, activating public spaces and better utilizing the area that is available. So I really love that. I love that idea. Building off of that, are there any other new innovative, because you've definitely talked a lot about working with the different, subject matter experts and bringing people together and collaborating. And I think that's definitely key. But I also want to provide space for you to speak on, similar to the activation of public spaces or similar to potentially what you noted on as having a list of potential areas that could be developed that you would support, development on. Similar to that, I want to leave space for you to share any specific policy ideas that you have to address either housing or homelessness that you'd like to see come to fruition if you were to be elected during your term.
Sure. Thanks very much. And I think the number one priority for our district in terms of development, where we can address some of these housing challenges, has to be, as you referenced before, the Valley View International District area, because for
Yeah.
too long that has stagnated, and that is an optimal place for development, for tax revenue to help pay for all these services, but also
Mhm.
to provide additional housing. So that is going to be a high priority for me. And I'm
Mhm.
proud of the work that we've done to kickstart some development there. When I was on the park board, we acquired a building at 5580 Peterson, which now houses some, like the Tanzanian Chamber of Commerce and the European American Chamber of Commerce in the heart of this area. That the original plan was to knock that building down and convert it into
Mhm.
green space, and that could still happen. And then to supplement that, we included $20 million in the 2024 bond election to
Mhm.
help pay for more parkland in this Valley View International District area.
Yeah.
Stuff contiguous to the Prism Center, again, with the idea of having it be towards a signature park that we can develop around to
Yeah.
incentivize the development. Because for too long, this has been, it's stalled, and we needed
Mhm.
to get this project moving forward. And so the city doesn't own, Valley View, and the city can't force a developer to develop it. What the city can
Yeah.
do is make it appealing for development to occur. And
So,
if you look at the success of this park-oriented development that we've done at Hillcrest Village in the northern
mhm.
part of the district, trying to replicate that on a much larger scale,
Yeah.
to me, this is the kind of stuff that we need to be doing and thinking
Okay.
creatively about. And so that's going to be a high priority for me.
That's awesome. I love that. That'd be really amazing to see get done during your potential term here. Well, that's we're getting close to time for today. I want to thank you so much for your time and remind everyone that early voting starts on May 27th and election day is June 7th. Jeff, how can people learn more about you and support your campaign if they're interested?
Yeah, thanks, Austin. Yeah, right now we are focused on getting out the vote. And so if you're interested in learning more, you can go to jeffkittner4dallas.com, or you can
Mhm.
email me at jeff@jeffkittner.com, and would love to get you involved with our campaign. We've got so many amazing volunteers, and I feel so fortunate that I feel like this is just a community-led campaign that I'm a part of. But I just, I could spend the next hour talking about all of the awesome people that have helped us block walk and poll greet and make phone calls and send postcards and send emails and are working behind the scenes to make sure that we turn out all of our people and win this election. So visit the website if you want to learn more. We'd love to have your support in any way, and really just appreciate the opportunity to be here. May 27th through June 3rd is early voting. You can vote anywhere in Dallas County. The county has limited spaces currently because there's only, as you referenced, only District 11 and District 8. But if you're a D11 resident and you're voting early, the places most likely that you'll vote at would be either the Royal Lane Baptist Church at Hillcrest and Royal or Fred's Park Library at Hillcrest and Beltline. Of course, you can vote anywhere. If you happen to be in District 8 and you want to vote at one of those places, you can, or some of our suburbs in Dallas County have elections going on too. You can vote anywhere in the county, but chances are, if you're a D11 voter, you'll be voting at Royal Lane Baptist or Fred's Park.
Fantastic. Fantastic. Well, Jeff, thank you so much for joining us this morning, and best of luck with the rest of your campaign. We really appreciate you taking the time out to talk about these important issues.
Yes. Thank you, Austin. I appreciate the opportunity and look forward to working with y'all further.
Fantastic. Fantastic. Before we sign off today, we want to encourage our audience to attend the Dallas Housing Coalition's next event, which is an office opening and red tape cutting ceremony Thursday on June 12th. So more information will be available about that, but we're really excited. We got a new office. I'm going to welcome folks to it. Please also follow our socials for updates on how to get involved with the Dallas Housing Coalition. Please also visit our website, DallasHousingCoalition.com, to subscribe to our emails and join the coalition. Thank you to our viewers for tuning in to the 45th Housing for All webinar series, where we discuss whether Dallas is big and if it is